Welcome, dear friends, to the 11th edition of the entirely digital Hyderabad Literary Festival 2021. Welcome to the stream, Reading My Book, with interesting collection of books and writers. We have here Lina Vincent, Ishika Ranjan, Ruchi Ranjan, Bishan Sahai, and Arya Dharod. I invite the youngest member, Arya, to please come and read. I'd like to tell our audiences that this is a hybrid event, which means that some of our readers will be live and some will be recorded for various logistical reasons. I invite Arya and tell you a little bit about this young man who is a 10th grader, a student in Hyderabad, who enjoys watching movies, playing any and every sport, jamming on his drum kit, reading uninterrupted and traveling to interesting places. Wow. He writes short stories, poetry, prose, and believes that his writing has shaped him all of his 13 years. He's an ambivert who likes to meet and get to know new people, and yet is shy and quiet in new settings. It does seem that young Arya is on a journey to discover himself and the world via traveling, reading, and writing. Arya will introduce his book, the recent one of the three that he has written, Lost Causes. Lost causes, more often than not, that is what parents, adults, and society think about teenagers. But they are definitely not lost causes. The book portrays teenagers in a new light and the amazing potential they hold. It is a reflection of the present generation's perspective on life, their dreams, hopes, fears, and character traits. It journeys through the lives of 6 teenagers bound by misery, yet unwavering. Lost Causes is a crime thriller and with a social relevance. Arya, over to you. I look forward to your hearing. Thank you.
All right. So today I'll be reading to you a few of my favorite chapters from the book Lost Causes. So here goes. Darkest hour. The room was dark and dreary, and the air was filled with a deep sense of gloom and misery. There was a man sitting in the middle of the room, his face wrinkled and scarred with age. On his face sat the smallest of frowns, but you could see the fear, gloom, and despair in his eyes. His eyes said it all. A little boy came into the room, panting, with a huge smile on his face. He was a 6-year-old kid who had just got home from playing with his friends in the garden. His smile vanished as soon as he saw the old man sitting in the dark room. "Uncle, what are you doing here?" he demanded, perplexed, and a hint of fear in his voice. Antonio spoke in a heavy voice. "You're coming with me to my house now." The child didn't seem to understand. His face turned angry. "Why, uncle? I'm not coming with you," Peter said defiantly. The old man remained silent and just stared long and hard at the boy. "I'm not coming with you," Peter repeated, raising his voice. "You're coming with me," the uncle repeated, raising his voice this time. The child crossed his arms and sat down on the armchair next to his uncle. He looked up at the old man and said in his most defiant of voices, "No, I'm waiting for my parents to come home. They're returning from their trip tonight." "Your parents are not returning, Peter," the uncle said in a grave, deep voice. He looked right into Peter's eyes. "How can that be? They promised they'd come back. They promised they'd get me a new train set. Where are they going now, uncle? Are they going to be delayed? What about my new train set? Why aren't they coming back?" He was flooding Antonio with questions. He didn't understand what his uncle had said. He was angry about his train set, and he thought his parents were going somewhere else on a business trip, as they frequently did. "No, Peter, stop asking questions. You don't understand." The uncle got up and grabbed Peter by the arm, but Peter wriggled away from his grip. "I'm not coming. Just tell me how many more days before my parents come home, and if they're getting my train set." And he looked deeply, pleading at his uncle. Antonio got frustrated now and held the boy's arm with such an iron grip that the boy couldn't wriggle free, no matter how hard he tried. Peter, your parents aren't returning. Not now, not ever. You're coming with me to my house. The boy finally understood. Tears welled up in his eyes. He tried to speak, but words didn't come out. Are they? Are they? He stuttered. He recollected seeing Alice, his nanny, lying on the floor, phone in hand, shocked expression on her face. Not breathing, just lying so still. Antonio looked up at Peter with a face so deep, so dark, so grim that it would even scare a grown up man as he nodded and uttered those dreadful words that would change Peter's life forever. Yes, Peter, your parents are dead. They are no more. They are never, ever coming back. The next chapter is Fight Club. Theo stormed out onto the deserted playground, covered entirely with soft brown dirt and sand. A light breeze had lifted up and was slowly blowing cool air onto his face. The radiant sun cast a warm glow onto the world, and the air had a still calmness that only one person would feel like disturbing at that moment. Storm clouds formed above Theo. Cold, wet rain poured down, as if it was nature's solution to cool his fiery temper, and thunder struck everything in sight. The pleasant calmness in the air immediately drifted away, enveloped by Theo's negative air. He stood on one side of the playground, his chest heaving up and down, his entire body trembling in fury. Soon the bell would ring, and he would be confronted by the gang, who would yet again mock him, jeer at him, and make him fight them again. Fight and lose. Theo's prediction was bang on. As the bell rang, the corridors filled with noisy students, chatting and laughing. Five large figures stepped out of the building's main entrance. Well, three big figures and two small ones, to be precise. Hey, American boy, what's gotten into you? Did our fights make you so mad at the world? Came the booming voice of Peter. Well, that was the motive behind it, added Jose. They all smirked a little and came closer to him, surrounding him in a small, tight circle. Ollie spoke up. Didn't your mama teach you anything, boy? No messing with the teachers, especially Mr. Quintin. We saw him marching towards the principal's office on our way out, with his face bright red. You in big trouble, boy. He nudged Theo by the shoulder, pushing him away. Theo just managed to breathe out through gritted teeth. Go back to class, man. This is more fun anyway, Raid joined in, coming closer to Theo. He could smell onions on Raid's breath. Who would want to spend 10 minutes listening to that boring old lizard, Mr. Danny, rattle on and on about the history of football? Respect your teachers, boy, Merle joked, giving Raid a push backwards with two firm hands. Oh, sorry, Merle, Raid replied, pushing Merle back with double the force. Merle moved a few steps back, then steadied himself before shifting his gaze back to Theo. Who wants to listen to that boring old pig? Mr. Danny rattled on and on. That nicer? Raid continued. Yo, I want to just push him onto those lockers and bang him until he loses all his front teeth. There was a slight cheer for Raid from the others as he high-fived Ollie. Guys, let's not get distracted. We haven't come here for Mr. Danny or Merle. Our target's right here, Peter prompted, gazing at Theo with deep, serious eyes. They all narrowed in on him even more, so that he now had to push them away to even have space for himself. Also, he couldn't resist their terrible breaths. Just leave me out of this, he snarled. Aw, tough guy, eh, Theo? You don't tell us what to do, Wraith sneered. Theo was boiling up now, and the blood in his veins had turned fiery red. All it would take was one more rude dialogue. Theo hated these five boys' stubborn rudeness and behaving like they were the best. Theo could sense the coming onslaught of the rude comment. He knew it. Any moment now, it would be spit out by one of them. Theo braced himself and cracked his knuckles. He had a feeling he would be needing them in the moments to come. Peter's mouth opened, and words began to form on his tongue. Theo was ready. You are nobody, Theo. You don't know what the real world's like. You and your parents have it all nice. Theo was surprised. Peter had hardly mocked him. Theo hadn't ever expected such a thing would come out of Peter's mouth. However, the mocking jibe was yet to come. Peter whispered something to Jose, who whispered something back. Yo, Theo, I bet you ain't gonna stay in this school another day. Mr. Strillers is so gonna expel you from the school after what you've done to Mr. Quintin. So sad. I'm gonna miss you, bro. I'm sure that must be pretty hard on your parents. After all, they have been running a little low on funds, right? That was it. Theo tried to contain his fury, but this was the last straw to trigger Theo's rage. He walked casually towards Jose and crossed him before suddenly turning back. Hey Jose, my mom told me not to get into fights or get too angry, but in one swift blow, Theo mustered all the force he could and brought his hand hard down onto Jose's face. Jose, not expecting this sudden blow in the slightest, fell to the ground, clutching his face with his hand. There were drops of blood trickling from his nose. Still lying down, Jose removed his hands from his face, brought tongue up and out, and licked the drops of blood off his nose. The others charged. Jose got up and began shouting to the other classrooms, Fight! Fight! Word of the fight spread from one kid to the next, and in an instant, 200 kids had charged down the school's main steps to witness the spectacle taking place. The sound of thundering footsteps and excited chatter filled the air. The entire school had left their classes, charged out the doors just to see the fight. The first few, who had been running down abruptly, stopped a few meters from the fight and held their hands out wide. They stopped the rest of the kids. Everyone tried to get closer and peek over the shoulders of the kids in front of them. In just 5 minutes flat, all the students had evacuated the classrooms to the dismay and shock of the teachers and gathered around the playground. The noise of 6 kids had gone to the noise of 200 kids, and now an excited, eager chant had gone into the air. The kids were all chanting as one, unified, as if cheering on their favorite sports team, the noise ringing in the air. All were chanting a single word, a single ruthless, mean, often bloody and violent word. Fight, 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 fight.
Thank you, Arya. That's an interesting beginning of your book. Yeah, I wish you all the best for further readings and books and writings. We move on to the next set of reading. Happy to introduce to you Ishika Ranjan, who's a student of the 11th grade in Hyderabad. An avid reader, she has a penchant for writing. At the age of 7, she started penning down essays on her favorite pastimes, nature, and the world around her. She later graduated to writing on more elaborate themes covering genres like soft sci-fi, adventure, and humor. While authoring her debut book of Drabbles, she relied on her vivid imagination and strong vocabulary, which has received widespread appreciation. She's now working on the plot of her second book. Her writing abilities have also earned her the editorship of a school magazine. Her mother, Dr. Ruchi Ranjan, lives in Hyderabad, the city of Nizams. Born and brought up in New Delhi, she holds a doctorate in child psychology from the University of Delhi and is a trained counselor. At present, she works with marginalized children in select schools of Hyderabad. She taught psychology at the university level and has, to her credit, several published research papers. Her recent book of Drabbles comprises stories inspired by her surroundings, people, and their idiosyncrasies, reflecting deep sensitivity and positivity. The book has been received well both in India and abroad. It also features in Amazon's bestsellers list. Her father, Bishan Sahai, the youngest, I may add, of this trio, is a non-agrarian, a postgraduate business administration diplomat from Delhi University. He's a retired corporate manager, having held senior executive, advisory, and board-level positions in engineering and pharmaceutical companies. He's an occasional writer and writes mainly on governance and management-related subjects. His reading interests are varied, though historical fiction tops the list. Known for his brevity, precise, and wit, he is, in his book of Drabbles, he has interwoven anecdotes mostly from his workplace and related interactions with colleagues and friends. A word about the book that the trio, grandfather, daughter, and granddaughter, will be reading out of. Our World, a Symphony of Drabbles by 3 generations, is a compilation of 86 stories in the form of Drabbles, from a family of 3 generations, the grandfather, the mother, and the daughter. A Drabble is a work of fiction, a story written in exactly 100 words, not a word more, not a word less. The essence of the Drabble is in its brevity, testing the author's ability to express meaningful ideas in a limited space. May I request you to please play the recordings of Our World, a Symphony of Drabbles, read by 3 generations.
I am Bishan Sahai. This story is titled Chi Chi. This event belongs to the period before the Chinese Revolution. The Chinese were westernizing, and the West at best was patronizing. Dr. Soong, Kuomintang's foreign minister, was seated beside an English grandee at an offshore dinner in London. My lord didn't know that he spoke English. There was no conversation. After soup, the Englishman, to be polite, turned to the yellow man. Like it soupy? Dr. Soong smiled and nodded. During the after-dinner speeches, Dr. Soong was requested to speak. He delivered, much to his neighbor's discomfort, an excellent speech in flawless English. As he sat down, he turned to my lord. Like a speechy?
Hello friends, I am Ruchi Ranjan. I am going to read my story, Dev and His Companion. She was his constant companion, loyal and dedicated to the core. In times of joy and sadness, she provided true and unconditional love, rarely seen even in human beings. The 4-legged Julie and the 2-legged Dev were inseparable. With very few friends of his own breed, my grandfather's house was the only abode they visited. Life is full of twists and turns. Dev succumbed to a strange illness, leaving Julie all alone. Not sure if she understands what has happened, but her daily visits to my grandfather's house continue. She searches each and every room with a sad, vacant look.
Hello, my name is Ishika Ranjan and I'll be reading my story Real versus Real. Following the stream of black smoke, we departed from the road. Julia and I soon found ourselves surrounded by a dense forest. The cloud of impenetrable murky smoke led us to a decrepit house. The steady flame wasn't being tended to at all. 2 burnt skeletal bodies lay outside. We had to act. Fast, frantically, we ran in search of aid. The sound of a running river guided us to a throng of people. How could they be so oblivious to the raging fire so near them? Angered, we confronted them. We were left red-faced. It was a movie shoot.
Now I am going to read the story titled Hide and Seek. Under the bed, below the table, behind the door, my entire family was playing hide and seek. Social distancing and lockdown had limited our movement. He had to be somewhere. It was difficult to search for one located in a doorway. He refused to respond to our knife calls. His silence complicated the operation. Tempers ran high. Without him, work from home was impossible. And during COVID-19, everything had to be done virtually. Classes to webinars. Exhausted, I went to make a pumpkin spice latte and reached for a cup and saucer. There lay silently the hidden one My smartphone.
My next story is titled Deep Sea Terror. It was a cold morning. Vacationing in Mauritius, I had planned to go scuba diving. Decked up in a diving suit, flippers, and carrying an oxygen tank, I was ready for an adventure. Splash! I jumped in. Exploring the habitat of sea creatures, I suddenly saw an unidentifiable creature heading my way. Petrified, I began swimming at full speed towards the boat. This strange fish was already there before me. Instinctively, I screamed for help. The guide who had come to my rescue burst out laughing. "It's our local dolphin," he said, bemused. Chuckling, we all swam elegantly with the intelligent creature.
This story is titled What Hurts Most. My friend Malti, a management consultant in her 30s, was returning from Missouri with two male colleagues after conducting a training program. They are waylaid by laठी-bearing hoodlums. निकालो क्या है तुम्हारे पास? Wallets were quietly handed over, rings, bangles, and watches were snatched. Malti sent through the ordeal, nervous and apprehensive, until one rogue came round to her side of the car and whispered, "Don't worry, Mataji, we only want money." Certainly, they were unscathed. The car was allowed to leave unhurt. Malti was livid, recounting the trauma to me. "I can't imagine that Tolde could call me Mataji."
My next story is titled Good Vibes Only. The kaleidoscopic swirl of colors made her sit upright. The reflection of bright shades on the window mesmerized her. As the gale of wind rattled the glass, the window pane danced to its tune. The air was ripe with the fragrance of loamy earth and delicate blossoms. The pleasant, dewy petrichor smelt just heavenly. Anika had been feeling low ever since she had been confined to bed. The accident had been unfortunate, a stroke of bad luck. It had restricted her mobility. Holding her crutches, she mustered the courage to stand and took a deep breath. Healing had only just begun.
My next story is called Dark. The whole world turned black. Was I unconscious, or was this a dream? Slowly, I raised my arm, then attempted to pinch myself. Ouch! My mind was foggy. Trudging ahead through the dark maze, I crashed into several obstacles. Stumbling, I reached heaven. My source of divine light lay in front of me. But what was this mysterious object radiating such bright light? The sun? No, it must be the moon. As I reached the balcony, my mother flashed the torch at my face. There was a power cut. The past week's sleepless nights had finally taken its toll on me.
My next story is titled The Wider Lens. Having failed his engineering exams, Suraj was shattered. Life had no meaning and he wanted it to end. Deep in thought, he sat on the shore, gazing at the birds and the sun going down. Setting up his DSLR camera, he captured the image. The sight of a bird encapsulated in the ring of fire, appearing to break free, shook him completely. Like the bird, he imagined himself soaring high above the sun. Gone were the days when he would sit alone and brooding. Photography had always been his passion, and in an instant, he found new meaning to life.
This story is titled Paris Preempted. Ramesh, a young boy in his teens, was allowed a month's holiday in England by his affluent parents. Condition being stick to England, no travel to Sin City, Paris. Paris being taboo, naturally was predominant in Ramesh's plans. Cleverly, he addressed 3 postcards to his mother, each dated at a week's interval, aided by the tourist guide that described his imaginary excursions in London and around. These he handed over to the landlady to post each date-wise and off to Paris. But the puzzled landlady, seeing no point in delaying the job, put them all in the mailbox, all together.
My next story is titled Daughters as Daughters. Undaunted, she drove all the way to the Godavari river bath. In their patriarchal setup, which predominantly eulogized on the birth of a son, here was a daughter taking charge. Transcending the taboos imposed by society, she carried the earthen pot of her father's ashes for immersion. Keeping herself afloat on the wobbly coracle, she held on to the pot. The boat paused in the middle of the river. With a heavy heart, she let it go. Life comes full circle. She moved ahead, a snail on the shore, back bearing a tough exterior. She was down, but not out.
Now I'll be reading my story, Necklace or Noose. It was the most alluring heirloom. Intricate carvings of phrases from the Bible ornamented the pendant. Today, this precious antique was finally mine. Alone in the Hertfordshire hills, I set out on my solitary hike. The necklace adorning my neck grew tighter with every breath. Soon, it was choking me. Eerie sounds echoed through the hills. The cawing of ravens rang over my shrieks. No matter how hard I tried, it wouldn't come off. An enormous banyan tree loomed in the distance. Hundreds of bodies hung from the branches of the tree, each dangling with a necklace similar to mine.
My next story is titled The Silent Night. The grandfather clock struck. Dong. It was 12, midnight. I woke up to a sound. Thup, thup. Somebody was trying to break open the door. Terrified, I covered myself with the blanket. There was a pause. Then it started again. I shuddered. In the quiet of the night, the sound was shrill and piercing. I edged my way slowly in its direction and asked, "Who is it?" There was no response. The sound grew louder and louder. I moved ahead and found myself standing in the bathroom. Wiping the beads of sweat off my forehead, I tightened the dripping water tap.
Truly delightful, absolutely delightful reading by Sri Sahai, Ruchi Ranjan and Ishika Ranjan. Beautifully rendered and lovely recording as well. Thank you so much for this very novel reading. There is a question or two in case we have some time. I would like to now move on to our last reader, Mario Vincent. Mario Vincent, also known as Botch, is a techie who lives and works in Bangalore. An alumnus of the Indian Institute of Science, he spent the first several years of his career working in various places around the globe before he decided to settle in Bangalore. He's passionate about traveling, about eating and drinking, about reading and writing, and possibly doing all of the above at the same time. It puzzles him that life has surrounded him with more than his fair share of eccentric characters. They do make life interesting, though. And I look forward to the reading by Mario of Jungle Submarines. He says about this book, and it is said that sometimes the book is comical, sometimes poignant, always gripping. Jungle Submarines follows the real-life adventures of Botch as he grows up with his eccentric family. Papa the stoic, Mama the passionate, Meenu the thug, Anu the stubborn, and Nini the sweet, in a country and a world that are charmingly disorganized. Over to you, Mario Vincent, for your reading. Thank you.
So this, hello everybody. The book has many incidents, strung in chronological order. So I thought I'll read a section out of a chapter which happens in Hyderabad. I studied in grammar school, so a shout out to all grammarians there. This occurred after I destroyed, a computer in our lab, and then I was desperate looking for, how to fix that. So Botch suddenly felt energy flow back into his limbs. Chetan would be the savior. They would rush to Chetan's house and he would present them with the disc and they would rush back. But how? Chetan's house was at least 3 kilometers away on the other side of Abbott's. There was no way they could walk or run and reach there and back in the hour before Mr. Sampath returned. None of them had the money to hire an auto rickshaw. In any case, their parents had warned them not to ride in an auto without an adult. The energy flowed back out of Botch's feet and he sank down in the chair again, already feeling the blows from the principal's stout cane upon his legs. The shame of being expelled would probably be so bad that he would have to run away and become a beggar. Possibly a legless beggar hunched and quivering outside grammar school while his friends passed him by, little knowing that the miserable figure outside the gates was once their friend. As Botch sank deeper into this reverie, Amir, ever practical, snapped his fingers. "Let's think," said Amir. "We must get to Chetan's house. But how?" Ali thought a little bit. "Maybe we can borrow some money from Narayan and hire an auto." But on second thoughts, that was not a good idea. Narayan was a mean sapus who hated children and would probably not lend them any money. "How about we go by cycle?" said Amir. "Cycle? We don't have a cycle or cycles," Botch replied. "Well, we can borrow one from the watchman. I know him well. Let's go." Botch stumbled up at the crack in Amir's voice. A small surge of energy returned to his limbs. He followed Amir and Ali down the stairs and to the gate of the building. Amir caught hold of the gatekeeper, a decrepit, white-bearded gentleman going by the name of Khadar. "Khadar Mia, hame cycle chahiye ek aadha ghante ke liye," said Amir, which means, "Hey bro Khadar, we need your cycle for half an hour." Khadar spat his pan juice on the ground and nodded without saying a word. He handed his cycle keys to Amir. Amir winked at Botch and Ali and walked over to the cycle shed. There stood Khadar's cycle. It was a big black Atlas cycle. It looked well maintained, the frame dusted and clean, the chrome handles shiny, and the chain slick with oil. Amir unlocked the cycle, pushed it off its stand, and wheeled it out to the road. He waved at Khadar, who spat on the ground and waved back. Apparently, he was a wordless man. They stood for a moment on the road. Amir said matter-of-factly, "I don't know how to ride triples." Ali nodded. "I don't even know how to ride doubles." They turned and looked at Botch. Botch gulped. He, in fact, knew how to ride triples, or tribbles as they used to call it in those days. He had ridden many times with his home friends, Vasid and Samad, on Samad's brother's big black cycle. But this was on the safe roads in their sheltered colony, not on the busy commercial streets where their school lay, with the big double-decker buses thundering by every 2 minutes and the irascible traders balancing piles of stuff on their scooters whizzing by. Botch closed his eyes on the verge of declaring his inability to ride triples, and then the awful image of the principal smashing his cane into his unprotected back and legs came sharply into his mind. He opened his eyes and said faintly, "I know how to ride triples. I can ride." He took the handlebars from Amir and trundled the cycle over to a stone on the side of the road and stepped onto the stone and mounted the cycle. It was a tall cycle fitted out for Kadar's rangy frame. It was definitely too tall for a boy to ride. But ride they must, rather like Paul Revere, thought Botch. Only he hoped it wouldn't end like the charge of the Light Brigade. He gulped and steadied the cycle. Amir perched on the rod in front of him, and Ali clambered onto the carrier behind. Then, with a mighty shove and some well-timed ground kicks from Ali, they trundled off. They wobbled mightily for a few seconds. Then Botch got his balance and began pushing strongly on the pedals. Ali and Amir were in fact lighter than Wasid and Samad and kind of equally weighted, so they didn't unbalance the cycle. Also, this was a well-tuned cycle. Botch found it easier to ride than the one he had ridden at home. They trundled up Chiragali Gully, Amir tinkling the bell incessantly to warn folks in their vicinity to stay out of their way. They reached Abbott's and veered crazily across 4 lanes of traffic without being pulverized by a passing bus. On into King Koti, and Botch was getting more confident by the minute. This was a downward sloping road, so they sped down it fairly quickly, Botch veering expertly around little potholes in the road as if he had been born to this job. Of a sudden, Botch's pessimism dropped away. They were flying like birds through the air. They were going to get the disc and restore it to Mr. Sampath, and all would be well. They sped down the road, the sprocket clicking smoothly, the wind whistling through their hair, and Amit tinkling the bell like mad while passers-by stopped to stare after their crazy passage. The street curved and Botch tilted the cycle into the curve. They rounded the curve going full tilt, and there, scarcely 30 feet in front of them, a lady stepped into their path. She was apparently trying to cross the road, careless of life and limb, as is wont in India. Botch screamed and jammed on the brakes. Ali dragged his feet on the ground to act as a rudder brake. Amit could do nothing but tinkle his bell even more fiercely. The cycle fishtailed wildly, with Botch maintaining balance with superhuman control. The moments passed by in slow motion, the lady turning her head incredulously to stare at this projectile of doom heading towards her, the incessant tinkling of the bell, the screeching of the tires. Amazingly, they slowed. Botch remembers thanking God for Kader and his superbly maintained bicycle. Now they were 15 feet away, now 10 feet, now 5 feet. A collision was inevitable, with the woman moronically frozen in place, gawping at them. Botch jerked back on the handles, so the bike reared up and Ali's feet dragged fully on the ground as they slid to a complete stop. But Amir's knee did thud into the poor woman's soft belly. She staggered back, clutching her stomach in agony. "Amma, kya mara re," she groaned, which when translated means, "Oh mother, how you have hit me." Amir and Botch sprang off the bicycle and stood frozen in horror. What if this lady was permanently damaged? They would go to jail for sure. Already a couple of lurking auto drivers were sidling up to the scene. Auto drivers are notorious for taking sides in any road accident and beating up the person they consider the villain, without considering the right and wrong of the whole situation. The cold sweat broke out on Botch's forehead. This was turning out even worse than he imagined. Now he would be caned, expelled from school, and go to jail. Oh, curse that rotten Di Mello. The lady, still groaning, straightened up. She rubbed her belly a couple of times to check that all was in place. Then she raised her hand threateningly and stepped towards the boys. Amir glanced at Botch. Botch glanced at Ali. The lady looked fine, even better than fine, if a bit angry. They must escape. Baj sprang onto the seat of the cycle and pushed down on the pedal while Amer hopped onto the rod in front. Ali gave a mighty shove to accelerate their departure and sprang onto the back seat. Sorry, madam, they shouted as they swerved past the lady's threatening arm and narrowly avoided one of the auto rickshaw goons, then on down King Koti at breakneck speed. They heard the distant shriek of imprecations from the lady but paid no heed. In a second, were round another bend and out of sight. Thank you. Thanks, Amita. Over to you.
That was so delightfully funny. I'm so glad you chose to read out of a portion in Hyderabad. That's very nice. Well, thank you all. There are a question or two if you all would like to just respond, one question each, since Mario is here. Mario, what kept you from writing so long?
Well, this book has been in progress for many years. So it took me maybe 7 or 8 years to finish this one. But I think I picked up pace. So the next one may be only a couple of years down the line. Yeah.
Sounds very good. Wonderful. Thank you so much. One more question. Jungle Submarine. That's an interesting title. Where does it come from?
So the first story of the book is about an adventure when we were living in a jungle camp and we were kind of, attacked by elephants. So that's where the name comes from. Jungle submarines are the elephants.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Mario, for being here with us. The next question that's being asked is to the three generations. And the question that is being raised is, what made you decide to come together to write? And the second question connected to that is, why Drabbles? That's a challenging thing to do. So here's over to Ruchi, Ishika, and Sahai.
Yeah, hello everybody. This writing of Drabbles is a unique concept. So it has not been tried in India, though it is very popular in the UK. So during the lockdown, we took it up as a challenge, and you could say that the dark cloud of the coronavirus, it had a silver lining for us. So we penned down these short stories in 100 words. And as Ruskin Bond says, this is a very unusual combination of the grandfather and the mother and the granddaughter getting together. So, and we wanted to show how we could rise above this negativity and the three generations could work in harmony together. And they have different perspectives, different ideas, and it's very interesting to read the three perspectives by three different generations. So that has been highlighted in the book.
Lovely, lovely. Would you like to add to that, Ishika, Sahai?
He will not be able to answer because he has a hearing problem, but Ishika would be able to add. Yeah.
Please, Ishika.
I think there's two interesting things in our book. One, that it is stories in just 100 words, and one, that it is three generations coming together. So for the three generations together, in all our 86 stories, we can see the generational differences in all the stories. So my stories, they're mostly sci-fi, horror, thriller. My mother's are basically realistic fiction, and my grandfather's are real-life anecdotes. So these three generational gaps, they can be seen in all our stories, which is what makes them unique.
Wonderful. Very nice. Thank you so much. Very delightful indeed.
Thank you.
Last question to Arya, please, if you will unmute. Arya, I understand the concept of lost causes. Your title has, certain bediyas shown, hand clasps. So, and it is a thriller. And, here is a young teenager. What's going on?
So the handcuffs on the title, it was meant to create, it was kind of meant to foreshadow what's yet to come in the book. So there is jail and there is handcuffs and there is even breaking out of jail to come in the book. So keeping the handcuffs on the title was just meant to foreshadow that and also maybe provoke some interest in the readers.
This is your first thriller?
Yeah, it's my first thriller.
Okay. Did you enjoy writing it?
Yeah, it was really fun.
So amongst the different genres that you have been writing, which excites you more?
Thriller, yeah.
Oh, is that so? All right. Okay. Well, look forward to more from you as well. Sorry to keep the question and answers short. Thank you for taking them impromptu. And thank you for being with us for reading my book, all of you, and particularly Shri Sahai for making it possible from your space. Technology is not always the easiest, though it does help us connect. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here. And over to other sessions over these. Thank you, sir. Over to these other sessions that are in the offing for the next day and the part of what is left here. Thank you so much. Good evening to all.
నీరు నిమ్మల కింద గన్నెర్ల కింద వంగి పూలే రంగ కొంగందుతూనే